for if you're interested in knowing, what political ads have been run here, you can see, choose the country here, and then you choose the category. If it's political ads, and you choose, any issue, type in any keywords, and then you can see who paid for the ads, who's their target audience, how much money they have spent, whether the ads are still running or not, obviously, and then the demographic information of the audience. So you can see their gender, age, and location of the audience of that particular ad. And that's only for political and social issues ads. Right. And page transparency, this is also available from the ads library. So people can see who, the location of the page admins, right? The primary countries they are managed from, when the page was created, whether the page has changed its name. Again, that is one of the common tactics to spread misinformation as well. Someone can start a soccer club fans group, for example, or fans page, and then get a lot of followers, right? Closer to the election, they change the page to be supporting a certain political party. Previously, people could be misled by people who do these things. But now you can go to the page transparency and you can see that, wait a minute, this, whatever political party supporters page was actually soccer, fan page. On partnerships and promoting civic engagement, so I mentioned earlier, we work with local partners, including in Pakistan. We have trusted partners here who advise us on various issues, from safety, misinformation, hate speech. But in particular, now that we're getting close to an election, we work with BILDAP, whose expertise is on election. So we really want to work with them to do public education, essentially, on what, and they can also report content to us. They have a special channel to report harmful content relating to the elections. So it could be voter interference, bullying of candidates, and things like that. And we conducted a lot of training for government agencies, election watchdogs, NGOs, and vulnerable electoral candidates. Still on supporting civic engagement, we have We Think Digital program. This is a digital literacy program that was created by APAC experts for APAC. We have trained more than 2 million people around the region, and this is really to increase sort of critical thinking skills so that people can be more discerning social media users, right? So they don't spread things before verifying. And for voter education, we work with IFES. This is the page that they'll be using, where they spread a lot of information from the Election Commission, and soon they will have videos on bullying and misinformation issues related to the election. All right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Priyanka to go into safety. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Dr. Priyanka Bhalla. It's a pleasure to be in Pakistan and also with you here today. As mentioned during the introduction, I'm with the safety policy team here at Meta, which basically focuses on issues of child safety, youth safety, women's safety. And prior to Meta, I was actually working for a bunch of technology startups that were looking at issues of online misogyny across social media platforms. Before that, I also worked in the international development space, looking specifically at child and women's protection after emergencies. And part of that work was also sometimes working in different election contexts, trying to increase the participation of women in particular during those times. So again, pleasure to be with you here today. I'm going to talk to you more about what Meta's approach to safety actually is within the election context, but also with a focus on journalist safety, as in how can you protect yourself better based on the policies and tools that currently exist today, right? So really quickly, in terms of our approach to safety, it's really a 5-point approach. The First is on partnerships. We have 850 partners worldwide. And why do we have these partners? We have them because we realize we're not experts on all things safety. So Alice already mentioned, we have some trusted partners. Besides that, we have different partners in the civil society sector, think tanks, different experts, government agencies as well. Again, just to really understand what are the exact issues on the ground and to be aware of the cultural context that's there. In terms of the policies, I won't go into it deeply because again, Alice mentioned to you the community standards. Again, for repetition's sake, these are the rules that govern what stays on the platform and what comes off. As many of you would already know, these are global rules, and it's always a tricky balance for us because we have to address user safety and respectful behavior online. We also have to make sure there's freedom of expression of voice when it comes to that. And third, we need to make sure we understand the cultural and local context as well, despite these rules being global. These are also a living document. So it's not that these rules are set in stone. So, sometimes we realize we have gaps in our policies, right? So based on that, we try to then amend these policies and add more context to them. If you're curious about how this actually happens, happy to speak to you about it later on. Third, we have our safety tools. Our safety tools are literally the different tools that improve your user experience and level of safety across our family of apps. I'm going to take you through a very quick interactive session later on to explain to you what some of these tools are. Some of you might already be aware of these, others might not be. What are some of these tools addressing? They're addressing issues like, what if my account is hacked? How can I protect myself better? What if I don't want someone to download my profile photo on Facebook and then put it somewhere else? How do I protect myself from that? What if I am a 16-year-old teenage girl in Pakistan and someone is sending me creepy DMs? How do I make sure that doesn't happen? What if I'm a journalist during election time and there's targeted harassment and hate speech against me? What are some tools that can actually help me with that, right? So we're going to review a bit of that. Then fourth, we have our resources. I just want to make you aware of some journalist safety resources that we have, but also the Meta Safety Center, which is kind of like a gentle reminder of everything that we've covered here today. And finally, yes, it sounds a little bit cliche, but we take feedback very seriously because as I explained earlier, the community standards are a living document. So if we get feedback, dekhiye aapne ye cover nahi kiya, or this hasn't been there, or this violation is not covered. So we want to listen to the different audiences to understand how that might be improved. And same goes for our tools. Same goes for our resources also. Maybe with some of our resources, we can do a better job of localizing them. So we listen to that feedback as it evolves and try to adapt to that as well as best as we can. In terms of our policies, Alice, of course, covered in great detail what we actually do when it comes to misinformation and voter interference in particular. She also talked about violence and incitement. This is really a landscape of all the different policies that are covered in the community standards, but I wanted to focus on two in particular, which again, it is very relevant to the election context in particular. The first one is around bullying and harassment, and there's really just two things I want you to remember when it comes to our bullying and harassment policies. The first is that we do distinguish between private individuals and public figures. Why do we do this? We do this because when it comes to public figures, we do allow a certain level of criticism against them, okay? Number one. Number two, we have additional protections when it comes to minors. Why do we do this? We do this because for anyone who is under the age of 18, we understand that there is much deeper emotional and psychological impact on those individuals, and so we have additional protections. Third point that I would like for you to remember is that in 2021, and this is an example of a policy amendment, we actually amended this policy to try and include coordinated mass harassment, right? Why did we do this? We did this because we understood that during crisis situations and elections in particular as well, coordinated mass harassment against individuals could increase, right? The threat of that is greater. And we also understood that there's certain vulnerable groups that are more disproportionately affected, such as female candidates and journalists and activists, right? So we adapted this to our policies and made sure that that particular type of coordinated mass harassment is also covered. Some quick examples of what we remove under this policy. This is not all that we remove. We remove much more. As Alice already pointed out to you, you can find the granular details on the Transparency Center, right? But these are some examples. So the first one is repeated unwanted contact. So sexual harassment in particular, for example. This can be on the publicly or also on private FB Messenger, for example, right? Attacks through negative physical descriptions. Content sexualizing another adult. This could be, for example, a Facebook page where a female candidate is being sexualized in a completely unfair manner and untrue manner. So this is something that would be removed under the bullying and harassment policy, right? So these are just some of the different examples, and there's many more, and again, you can read about them in the Transparency Center. The second one, I just want to cover a little bit more in detail, and again, I think some of you are quite intimately familiar with this policy already, but again, for the sake of really trying to cover the landscape of what is important in elections, I did want to mention hate speech again. So Alice briefly mentioned that when it comes to hate speech, again, there's, I think, two things I want you to remember. The first is that we remove hate speech defined as direct attacks on people on the basis of their protected characteristics. What are these protected characteristics? These are protected characteristics that are already enshrined in both international and domestic laws, right? And here are just some really quick examples. So whether it's race or ethnicity or gender or religious affiliation, this is what we would be covering as a protected characteristic under hate speech. What is the second thing I want you to remember? I would like for you to remember that there's 3 tiers of attacks that are covered in our policy. The first tier is direct calls to violence or dehumanization. A very obvious example of this would be if someone says, let's kill all, and you can put in a group of people, right? Second example is statements of inferiority, contempt, or disgust. This would be someone saying, all women only belong in the kitchen, okay? Third tier would be direct calls for exclusion or calls for segregation. So in the election context, it would be so-and-so group should not be allowed to vote. That's a direct call for exclusion of an entire group of people, correct? Now, actually, I'm going to stop talking about policies because I've talked a lot about policies and so has Alice. And really, I want you to take your phones and I just want to show you a couple of safety tools that we have across our family of apps. And some of you might already know about these, but others might not know how to actually get to them. So the first question I have for you is, who here in the room has done privacy checkup on Facebook? Anyone? Okay, we do have some people in the room who have done this. Can you please tell me why you have done this? Why have you done privacy checkup? Anyone?